while we're bringing that up here, kind of looking in the news and trying to find a little bit of humor in critical infrastructure protection. It's all around us, but I decided to pick one out of the transportation community. So a lot of you are familiar with the situation with air traffic controllers right now. So I'd like to ask the audience, what's worse than an air traffic controller that falls asleep? One that falls asleep during the movie. So, it can get very difficult. See, they're firing a little late, but I'm glad to see they're out there. Okay, before we begin, I need to point out this little fine print here is that some of the things I'll be telling you are my own opinions and don't reflect the official policy of the Department of Defense, etc. The key thing here is I want to talk about a three-tier model that we have at the iCollege that covers critical infrastructure education. Next slide, please. Before we do that, I want to just kind of show you a slide that talks about what we do. At the National Defense University in Washington, D.C., we're located on, our campus is located on Fort McNair, right down in downtown D.C. And we're the iCollege, and we look specifically, of the 5 colleges, we look specifically at information and information use for strategic advantage. So these are some of the topics we look at, kind of the whole gambit of information use across the government. You can see the different quadrants there. And if you look down down through the center, you'll see some of the central things that we are addressing in terms of the cyber, the technology piece, etc. So the things I'll talk to you about are courses that are centered around use of information. We don't do engineering. We don't do structural analysis in that sense, but we do information analysis from a strategic purpose. Next one. The things that we cover with our courses, we have a global perspective. And you'll see on here, these are areas that we're involved in as a college. So our courses are international in nature. You'll see where we're working with the various combatant commanders around the world. We also are working with several of our NATO and coalition allies. And you'll see presence that we have in the Middle East in terms of courses where our students come from. In Asia, these are programs where we're conducting courses and international conferences. One of the things that we found is that there's a lot of questions about how we do cyber and how we do protection of critical national assets. And most recently, we did a conference, a 2-day conference in the Middle East, in Dubai, that dealt exclusively with regional critical infrastructure issues. And we talked a lot about pipeline protection, those kind of things in terms of what is looked at. One of the things that we look at in our courses is that the definition of what's critical in terms of infrastructure protection assets and protection of assets changes when you go to different regions. For some people, it's electrical grid. For some people, they think of economic zones as being part of their critical infrastructure. So there's some areas in Asia, they look at waterways, they look at certain transportation paths as being critical, and so you have to expand the way you think of critical infrastructure, and that's what we do in some of our courses. Next slide. This kind of shows you what our student population is made of, and one of the key things I like to point out is that when you look at the 5 colleges that are associated with the university, we're the largest in terms of student population. And what you'll see there is the number of seats that we fill across our programs. I'll talk about our programs here in a second. But one of the things that we have is that all our students, this is a graduate level program, all our students are either GS-12s or above, or 04s and above. And we have quite a few students here who are general officers or senior executive service officials, and they come in and take our courses. So because of that, we structure courses that deal with, again, going back to that critical thinking, how do we use information strategically. Next slide. We also provide courses that support joint professional military education. So you look at the other senior service colleges, National War College, the Industrial College of the Armed Forces, the CISA is a brand new college, the College for International Security Affairs. We provide their electives to help fulfill their JPME requirements. CISA doesn't have JPME, but they have several programs that deal with counterterrorism and how they handle that, and we do critical infrastructure courses for that. We also have a concentration program called Information Operations Concentrated Program. And this is a special subset of the degrees that are done for the National War College and ICAP. And students come through this program. It has classified courses in it that deal with critical infrastructure, and I'll tell you about a few of those. And they come out with an additional moniker on their degrees that show they completed that additional level of education. Next slide. Now, within our college, this shows our master's program. And we do, like I mentioned before, we concentrate on information use for strategic advantage. And so you'll see our master's program is entitled Government Information Leader, Gil. Now, my name is Gil, but I had nothing to do with the naming. Yeah, I get accused of driving this degree program and naming it after myself, but I didn't do that. But what you see here is, you look down that column of the triangle, you'll see that these are the concentration areas that we have. So what we do in our master's is we focus on information leadership, but within the information leadership arena, we allow our students to have concentrations in these different areas. And they include two areas that deal with cyber. One deals with cyber security and cyber leadership, and also information operations. Now, in each one of these disciplines, those three are heavy in the critical infrastructure types of courses. But we offer, each one of the other disciplines has options for students to take one or more courses in critical infrastructure. And I'll talk about some of those in a second. So we feel that in order to understand how information is used, we have to understand how information is critical to a lot of the different sectors. So even though we may not talk specifically about engineering grids, or electrical grids, or water systems, or that type of thing, we realize that information or data are used in all these systems to control them, to manage them, and to maintain a U.S. quality of life that we like to maintain. Next slide, please. Now, this is the model that I want you to take away. So when we look at how information should be constructed, this is the model that we've set up. Now, I'll talk about three of the key course areas, but as you see here, we talk about a three-tier model. And what you'll see here is that we have a vertical tier, okay, that takes you from management to operational to strategy. So that's the vertical tier. We also have a horizontal tier that increases the level of critical thinking that a student has to use in order to complete the course. So this is key in that we look at coming in at, again, a management perspective, looking at policies, looking at that. We have policies, we heard some of that this morning, how we have policies to determine how we manage, how we protect critical infrastructure. Next, we look at the operational aspects in terms of how does that work, how do these critical infrastructures work, and then lastly, we talk about the strategic aspect in terms of how do we analyze or how do we look at national infrastructures in order to maintain our sense of national security. Now, interesting, national security can involve many things. So when we talk about critical infrastructures, you can say that we talked about the defense industrial base, and certainly that's very important, but we look at other things like financial systems, okay? Communication systems, which can be which if you lose those systems, you can have as much disruption to national security as you would have to a defense industrial base complex. So, again, the third arrow that I want to show is that the one that goes diagonally in the model. The thing that we want to do in each one of these courses is back that up with some sort of hands-on case study analysis, modeling aspect, in order to give students the breadth of knowledge they need in terms of seeing how these things work. The first course, again, is kind of a modeling aspect, and is a policy course, and the deliverable in that course is a paper dealing with some type of infrastructure issue, Usually it's related to critical information infrastructure. But as we move forward in critical thinking, the second level course, managing security control systems, the deliverable in that one is a analysis of a case study based on some type of installation that the students will select a particular sector in the critical infrastructure and analyze it based on an installation model to say what they found in terms of vulnerabilities and the need to protect it. At the higher level of critical thinking is the top course, the SIO course. That's a classified course, and the construction of that deliverable is students work with various sources of information, usually all at a classified level, and they construct a product that explains the vulnerability of a real national asset, the threat vector that threatens it, and how they would go about mitigating it. So you see the deliverable reflects the level or the increased level of critical thinking as you go out and you move up the vertical tier. So again, horizontal tier critical thinking matches the vertical tier in terms of going from a management perspective all the way up to a strategy construction perspective. Okay. Now, this is very quickly, these are some of the things that we have in each of the foundation courses. This is the first one. And you see here, this is a course that focuses on, in here, public policy and strategic management level types of concepts. Okay. One of the key things that we do in the construction of our courses is that we construct something called learning outcomes. Now, sometimes you'll hear courses that have learning objectives. Now, what's the difference between an objective and an outcome? Now, sometimes we say when you achieve the objectives of the course, it requires students to be able to repeat back certain parameters, in terms of like what's the 18 different sectors that constitute critical infrastructure protection in the U.S. What we want to do is take it beyond an objective and take it to an outcome. And so you'll see all our outcomes are based on students' ability to demonstrate critical thinking, and like I say, the first one here is to be able to analyze laws, national strategies, and public policies to say what are the advantages and disadvantages of all these. On the second learning outcome, be able to assess the strengths and weaknesses of various approaches to protect critical infrastructure. So learning outcome perspective, we feel gives a stronger student base in terms of measuring level of understanding and comprehension and generate that horizontal axis that we want to show progression in critical thinking. Next slide, please. Okay. This is the one that we talk about in terms of managing critical infrastructure. This is the operational piece. Now, this has a very heavy emphasis on the SCADA aspects. So we look at different types of control systems, industrial control systems. SCADA is just one of them. And we look to see exactly what the operational capabilities are of these systems, what the vulnerabilities are to these systems, attack vectors again. And then we look at how we mitigate these particular attack vectors. This course is very heavy on the technology pieces, so the highlighted bullet at the top there, so we use extensive use of CS security and exploitation technologies. So we look at terms of how do we do vulnerability scanning, how do we do, how would threat vectors be injected into the system. For instance, work with a very smart group of faculty. The designer of this course is the Dr. John Saunders. He's been at the university about 23 years. He took on SCADA on his own as an independent research project, his own project about 6 years ago, and started looking at these things. And so you look at some of the early things he was writing about, we're seeing that now. So we're seeing, like, you heard of Conflicker, the worm. Oh, yeah. He was talking about that even before we had Conflicker. He was saying that would evolve to something else. And then we had Stuxnet. So what he's done is he's looked at the Stuxnet content, and we don't have Stuxnet in the lab, so they'll go away with that field.
You're not sure. You're not sure.
What's that?
You're not sure.
Well, we're sure we don't have it. We're sure we don't have it in the lab. We're not producing Stuxnet. I don't know anybody saying we worked that. What we did was we looked at the insertion mechanism for Stuxnet, and that's what we show the students. We boil it down, be able to say, this is how Stuxnet is inserted, this is how it works, and so that's the technology piece we have. Again, learning outcomes. Again, If students look at how a control system can be exploited, it looks at the people, processes, technology, etc., and recommend mitigation factors. Great. Thank you very much. Okay. Next slide, please. Now this is very tight writing, but I want to show you this is how we construct a course in terms of content. So when you look at the situation here, you'll see here, this is a kind of layout for a course. Now, we have course delivery in two methods. We have a 5-week delivery method, which is basically 1 week online, 1 week in residence, and 3 weeks doing some type of paper or project, and we have a 12-week delivery that we use for the World College and iCollege. But you look down here, for this particular course here, you'll see where we start with overviews. We start right away with the lab, and we introduce what we call the Moby Industrial Facility. So what we did was we went out and looked at an actual government facility that had, fuel, water, security, bridges, physical security, all these kind of things that had maybe 4 or 5 different critical access sectors, and we modeled that out in a case study. It's about a 40-50 page case study. And so as we do our lessons in labs, the students begin to apply what they're learning against the Moby case study. Again, each week, and they're working towards a final case presentation of what they see operationally in the Moby installation. So again, they fold in things that we're learning about countermeasures for wireless, authentication, etc. We supplement that with guest speakers from different industries and government. In this particular case, we had speakers come in from the Army Corps of Engineers talking about what they're using, what they're looking at, etc., etc. And at the end, we wrap it up. One of the keys here is that for a 3-credit graduate course, we measure student effort at being about 125 hours within the course for exposure. So that's what we shoot for. So the pre-reading, the pre-week, the resident week, the reading they have to do during the week, the project, whatever they do at the end of the week for the final deliverable constitutes about 124 hours. So we look at that very carefully, make sure the students are spending time on the subject, dissecting it and taking a look at it. Okay. Last course I want to show you here is this. Yeah, next slide, please. Thanks. Last course I want to show you is this one I told you that's a classified course. Again, this one centers on what we call strategic fragility. Worked with another very smart faculty member, Dr. Robert Miller. His background started out as an attorney, but worked also in the Critical Information Office with the government and U.S. Treasury. And he coined the phrase, even before we started talking about resilience, he coined a phrase called strategic fragility. Mm-hmm. And he looked at the relationship between the different critical infrastructures and how affecting one can ripple through to others. And so he's written on this quite a bit. Again, in this particular one, we look at critical infrastructure, and we also look at examples of attacks on infrastructure and their consequences. So we take a look at real installations in the United States, and we see where the feeds are, basically, especially if there are information feeds involved, how one disruption here can ripple through and affect different sectors. Again, we talked about, I heard this morning one gentleman had a question. He was doing a briefing, and he found out he was talking to a group of internationals. He wondered, how do I back out of that discussion? But we deal with this up front and realize that because of what we're talking about, you can't get into this course unless you have a top secret SCI clearance because of the level of things that we discussed. And right now it's limited to U.S. citizens only. So again, the things we talk about, we feel are very important for senior leaders to know, very high up on the national strategies and the critical thinking piece, but we have to restrict what we can do with it. Again, learning objectives deal with the ability to construct that information. Last couple slides I want to show you. This is one of our concentration areas in our master's degree, and I just picked one of them. This is a new one that deals with cyber leadership. We call it Cyber L. And we say that if somebody's going to work in the cyber arena, they need to know about cyber governance, global commerce and technologies, interagency cooperation, collaboration, national security. And what we try to do is we've inserted in many of our concentrations in that master's degree the need to have some exposure to national infrastructure protection. So this is where we have the SCS course in. So a student has to take this course in National Intelligence and Cyber Policy, and they either can select to either take the course in terrorism, cyber crime, or take the SCADA course or the protection of SCADA systems. So this is an example of how we've inserted critical infrastructure into the curriculum. Yeah. Questions? Yes, sir. Is
this course available to persons within the defense industry? Civilians?
Yes. As I mentioned before, our courses, our student population, one of the slides there you saw, it said we have international students and students from private industry that are eligible to come to the courses. Students from private industry have to be sponsored by a government agency. So if somebody's working on a government contract and that agency says this is a person that we need to have in this type of course, learn this type of information, we can bring them in. Okay. One of the key things to kind of mention here for a second, if you're within DOD, the courses are free. There's no tuition. If you're with other agencies, you have to pay a tuition fee, but it's very low. Thank you very much. Thank you.